This is the Higher Ed podcast, presented by eCity Interactive. eCity creates websites, marketing campaigns, and magic for higher ed institutions large and small. Every digital challenge has a solution. eCity's talented team of problem solvers will help you find yours. And now, here's your host, Stephen App.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 8 of the Higher Ed podcast. I am your host, Stephen App. Really fun show today. We're talking about that big, beautiful center of your digital ecosystem today. That is your .edu. And in particular, we're talking about iterative website design and the pros and cons of such a strategy. And here to help me do that is Jason Buzzell. He is the Director of Digital Communications at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, home of the Division I Omaha Mavericks. Jason, thank you so much for joining the Higher Ed podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stephen, and thanks for the shout out for the Mavericks.
Anybody who has a mascot of a Maverick is okay in my book.
Yeah. No, we're Mavericks, not just our mascot, but kind of the way we're thinking, and I hope to talk a little bit about that during the show with you.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about how that ties into everything. Before we get going, tell me where you fit in the organizational hierarchy of the University of Nebraska, Omaha, because every higher education institution, I feel like, has a little bit of a unique aspect to their hierarchy. And so tell me where you fit in as Director of Digital Communications. Yeah,
for sure. The hierarchy can really matter, can it, in higher ed sometimes. We try to not let that impact us too much. As you said earlier, my official title is Director of Digital Communications. It reports into the Executive Director of University Communications that oversees our marketing and events and our graphic design and our website and some of our digital communication vehicles. We have a really interesting governance process that was created just before I came here that has a committee with vice chancellors, as well as a student and faculty and staff governing body presidents, as well as the campus CIO, which is really important. So although I report up to the executive director of University Communications, that digital communications executive committee is really important. The team I directly oversee is responsible for website, email newsletters, social media, web analytics, to just name a few. So the biggest of which we support is the website, and that's the one that we are kind of known for.
One of the things that prompted this episode was you wrote an internal article several months back at Nebraska Omaha detailing the changes that you made to the homepage on your website. And a few things stuck out to me when you wrote that article, including the use of data in your decision making, which we're going to get to, and I think just your comprehensiveness in communicating the changes that were made, or in some cases, untouched, to your internal community at UNO. I wanted the main thing, though, when I read that article, was I remember thinking that you had put so much time and effort into just the homepage of your .edu. And in conversations since, I know that that's part of a larger project. Can you talk about that process, updating just the homepage, and how it has fit into this larger process of getting your entire .edu up to date?
Yeah, definitely. Being in university communications, a communication strategy, and kind of building the why into the internal communication efforts was important to us. So the homepage, most visible on campus, gets the most attention. But that was just one of kind of several bigger projects we did. And we have this concept of phases. So each year, each half year is a phase, and the homepage was one of those. So since about early 2017, our website was pretty much fully converted to mobile responsive design. But a couple of years later, you come back to it, and what you did before, you learn from analytics and from user experience. Maybe we do it a little differently, or maybe we can take that and make it a little bit better. So all the users had to, with our old homepage, all the users had to use the top navigation or the footer. A lot of the top tasks weren't there because we were so focused on news and events, which was, 5 years ago, just getting that first homepage up, that was the big focus. But we had we had learned a lot, and it was time to make an update. So there's some other pieces around the website too that aren't as visible, that are being done iteratively. But this one was obviously one that needed some extra communications and rationale, and I think you ended up seeing that shared on the web.
Yeah, you mentioned in your answer that you work in phases. Tell me about when you started working with this process, with updating the website in phases.
Yeah, so this really began in 2013. We didn't even have a CMS then. It's hard to believe, and we didn't have a system set up for maintaining the website or doing projects. So really big credit to my boss and the CIO here of bringing the campus together. And we could have waited, 3 or 4 years and tried to make the perfect website, done a ton of work on the CMS. But with websites, sometimes they can get mired in that political game of what it looks like and who should be in control and what should the website look like, and then it never gets done. So the phased approach was something that this executive committee that I mentioned earlier really bought into. We started with obviously some of the college websites, and then other key things like admissions content, obviously the homepage and the top level pages, and they just started knocking them off one at a time. So they even went live before we had a CMS with some responsive design pages. And it was really a way to make some quick wins, make a splash, show that it could be done. And so was there some cleanup after? Yes. Was it easy? Not necessarily, but it did help push things ahead and not get stuck hoping for that perfect solution. So I think this really worked well with where we were at a few years ago, and it helped us kind of build out and formulate processes as we go. And it helps us now that we're coming back to the work that was done a few years ago and to try and make it better, again, more iteratively, more phased approach than trying to look for the perfect solution every time, especially with our limited resources.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. And obviously the homepage, politically, from an analytics perspective, I think you mentioned just that first impression that a homepage can make. I mean, the homepage is a big deal on a .edu. So I can imagine that that's a big prioritization when you're talking about this iterative web design and tackling everything in phases. I'm curious for other elements of your website. I mean, how are you and your team deciding what aspects of the site to tackle? Is there a master task list? Is there I know in many cases it's just whoever's talking the loudest. Do you have a particular campus stakeholder that's voicing their opinion and forcing changes through? How are you deciding what and when to tackle?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a bunch of different people who are always kind of pushing for better websites or their piece of the website to get looked at. A couple of years ago, when we had a kind of a dedicated project manager to that conversion project, we built a spreadsheet kind of scorecard together, and we were taking ideas from everyone, ideas from myself, ideas from my team, ideas across the campus of projects that should be done. And we started to kind of prioritize and give more points to ones that focused on top traffic or top tasks. Did they align to our strategic goals? Did it help students? Did it help faculty, staff? Was it going to maybe create revenue or save money? And then that kind of gave us a list in order of what we could maybe, pick 5 or 6 of these with that executive group that I mentioned, and let them kind of say, no, focus on this, or yep, you're on track, do this. It created a large backlog for us, which has been helpful now that the conversion project has ended, and it's kind of helped us pick a few projects that maybe people didn't know about or weren't pushed for. Everything's now a 2.0. So we just had homepage 2.0. We've done a lot on our news and events section. So that's like news 4.0 now. So it's kind of like product releases, but more focused on templates and content types. And I just can't overstate the executive committee has been really helpful for us with just keeping us on course and making sure that they're up to date with where we're going next.
You mentioned that you have a sizable backlog. How long, or how far out, I should say, are you planning your projects on that backlog? How far out are you be able to say, okay, this item on the list we're going to tackle on this date, it's going to take this long? Talk me through some of that timing.
Yeah, We do kind of 6 month roadmap. So we kind of conservatively build out room to say, you know what, during this 6 months from January to July, we're committed to these 2 or 3 projects because we know there's always kind of ones that pop up and get slid in there. So we kind of build out some space and for those things that kind of get thrown onto us, like you said earlier. The whole phase takes about January to December. And with the backlog we have a couple pages worth that could extend out to a couple years from now. We don't even really focus on that necessarily, though. It's just what can we do now based on our current workload, current projects that we have going on. And the backlogs, just we'll get to it when and if we get to it. I guess it kind of resembles that agile approach. We don't really call it that. We just keep picking off projects as we go. I guess we've never really thought of it like that. Like how many, if the full list of backlog projects, how many years or months would it take to get to? We've never really thought about it like that until you just asked that question, actually.
See, I'm glad. This is why you joined the #HigherEd podcast.
That'd be interesting to look at if we put those, with our IT team and with some of our content folks. Like, how long would it take to actually do all the projects that we have so far kind of identified? Like, how long would that take? That would be interesting.
Hey, podcast listeners. If you're anything like me, you've likely found yourself listening to more and more podcasts lately. And if that's the case, you're not alone. Recent research shows that 26% of Americans now listen to podcasts monthly. That's higher than the percentage of Americans using Twitter. For many podcast consumers, the rise in podcast popularity has led to dreams of producing a branded podcast for their own institution. Unfortunately, the road to planning and producing a podcast isn't as straightforward as consuming one. Luckily, the team at eCity has just released a new ebook that details the aspects of podcasting that you need to consider before pressing the record button on your own show, as well as how to ask for help if you're struggling to get started. Grab the ebook now at ecityinteractive.com/resources. That's ecityinteractive.com/resources. And as always, thanks for listening. Jason, you mentioned that you work very closely with information technology and, of course, other groups on campus. When you're working in this fashion, iteratively, I imagine that internal communications is really crucial. How are you communicating across offices to stay organized within your extended team?
Yeah. I think at the macro level, I've kind of touched on that committee. That executive level. And we have a couple through our campus newsletter. I make it a point twice a year that we do an update to campus, but that's at kind of a really macro level, like what projects we completed, here's our roadmap, here's what we're going to work on. At the what I would call the micro level or the day-to-day, our digital team or our web team, I would consider there's about 3 of my staff from University Communications with about 3 from information technology. They're called ITS. They meet every Thursday to go over tickets and upcoming projects. Our team in and of itself uses Slack. I know the IT team does too. So that kind of, the back and forth, we try to stay to tickets. We try to stay on task because you can get sidetracked through email so much. But, every now and then Slack helps us with that. Jira is our ticketing tool, so that allows us to collaborate both with ITS and then also with our users who are requesting. Maybe it's not a project; it's a ticket into us to make an update or to request maybe a change to a template. The meeting, I can't stress how important the meetings in person are, though. When a couple of those get postponed or we can't meet, it really impacts our timeline. So. As much as you can have Slack and tickets and do the tasks, those kind of regular meetings at least once every other week are really important, and it helps the devs, designers, and then the content and project managers get together. And that started 5 years ago with the web conversion project, and they've changed a little bit, but it's really helpful to have those regularly to stay on track.
And I imagine the backlog helps, and I know you kind of mentioned almost a lead scoring system of the tasks or phases that you're approaching for sprints. But I imagine, with so many different stakeholders, you must have a lot of jockeying for position to get their project bumped up higher on the list or get it addressed sooner rather than later. How are you engaging campus stakeholders just in terms of project prioritization and helping everyone manage expectations?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about that kind of the Mavericks, not just as our mascot, but there's just we're such a lean organization here. This is my third institution, and I really big credit to the leadership of that executive team, as well as my boss and the CIO. There's just a real focus on strategic goals and outcomes, and we haven't had as much of a hard time with this as some experiences I've had in the past, where you maybe have some hippos, highest paid person's opinion type pet projects or events where they're requesting custom templates. Just the leadership we have here and Omaha's mentality to be results focused has helped with this a little bit. So I actually have a little bit of a flip challenge is to make sure we stay, with the homepage. Nobody was asking for a new homepage. Nobody's asking for accessibility upgrades. Nobody's asking for custom, better designed or necessarily like in the weeds user experience improvements. But those are the things that we really have to make sure we carve out time for and make sure we're putting those on the roadmap ourselves. Again, I mentioned this concept of Maverick thinking. It's our nickname. Because we're so lean and so different, we have to really work a lot smarter. And that's where the roadmap comes in. That's where focusing on the users comes in. I think it kind of permeates through everything at UNO, and the website's just one example.
Jason, in terms of, I know you just mentioned the homepage and how that wasn't actually on your backlog of website tasks, but something that you felt like needed to be addressed. I'm curious about how you're communicating, or I guess in some cases, maybe the better word is how are you advocating for changes to the website that you'd like to make? Because at the end of the day, a change that you want to add on to this backlog is going to push a previously identified project down the list. So I'm sure that's a delicate balance.
Yeah. I think I can't overestimate the value of that executive group. So, towards the end of the year, when we're kind of finishing off a phase and a group of projects, October, November, December, we start talking, okay, in January, February, we're going to start a new phase. And we show user experience, some user testing things we've done. We look at click maps. I show them a little bit of analytics, and kind of helps build the case for, okay, hey, maybe we need to think about a new homepage, or maybe we need to update this template. And they're all in the room. Again, I can't overestimate the power of getting people in the same room, especially at the highest level, and really walking them through why something that may not be requested should be on the roadmap. I guess, again, can't underestimate the power of support from, in our case, the senior vice chancellor who chairs that committee. Some people's cases that might be a provost. It's just so critical. And then we've got some people out on the ground too. So all of the colleges have a lead communications person who kind of acts as a point on the website, and there's a bit of a back and forth there as well. So between those two at the highest level and then at the dean's level, I feel like we've built kind of a partnership so that the projects that are requested, hopefully the ones that really matter and are important to the institution, get on the roadmap, as well as a couple of these that might not be on the radar of the organizational focused folks on campus. I
know that you mentioned when you were talking at the end of the year, when you're having these executive leadership committee meetings, that you reference click maps and analytics, and a lot of what I'm hearing is data. Every time you say that, I'm hearing data and numbers and building a case. How are you deciding which data to collect on your website? Yeah,
I mean, obviously we have Google Analytics. I'm passionate about Google Analytics, and I come from kind of a market analytics background with previous jobs. So we don't have user-based tracking set up through Universal Analytics, but it's all kind of aggregates. But you start to figure out where people are going, what are the top tasks on the website. We've got macro goals like admissions applications and campus visit requests for more info, those admissions goals. We've got some e-commerce tracking on our bookstore, as well as the camps that we host for kids in the summer. A lot of summer camps in the summer. So those are kind of our macro ones that we're tracking. Most of these website tasks, you can pretty quickly and easily see what are the top tasks just from some aggregate Google Analytics tracking at a high level. And then we have done some remote user testing, which is really helpful too. So when they're looking for majors and programs, or they're looking for something on the homepage, that's really helpful. I think I mentioned Crazy Egg earlier. It's a visual heat mapping tool. Those are always helpful to just, you're able to, with a one pager say, hey, look at where everyone is clicking on this page. Maybe this is a place we should focus our efforts on. So a combination of kind of user testing, user feedback, those data points, it all kind of fits together and tells a story for hopefully not only what we should focus on and work on, but how, what the template should look like, or how can we help users get things done quicker and easier.
Yeah, I mean, do we get to a point where you have too much data? I mean, how much data is too much data? And I ask because, I wonder, how do you balance making an educated decision but avoid, getting lost in the weeds when you're trying to evaluate so many different sources of data?
Yeah, it can be really easy. We see that sometimes with our clients who request access to Google Analytics or want to look at Crazy Egg. If you don't have some experience or some knowledge, you can quickly get down a rabbit hole and spend hours and hours digging through the data, which is fun. But again, we have so few resources at UNO and so little time to focus on this. The challenge is kind of finding time to do that. I'd say, again, this is kind of my third institution. So you as in an agency environment, you start to see patterns, and I'm seeing patterns. And I'm blessed to have seen these over and over again, where you can see that things haven't changed a lot when it comes to user behavior. The devices have changed. The layout and design is a lot different than it used to be, but the top tasks really haven't changed. So, finding people, finding programs, finding admissions info like housing and financial aid, some of the HR policies, and obviously your job postings. Those are things that we know from user testing and just personal reviews of our website. There's enough projects there to keep us busy every day. So we kind of focus in on that data and those user tests related to those big top tasks. We've got a huge plate that doesn't even involve just the website. So between those, that keeps us busy enough and keeps us kind of focused on where we should focus our efforts when it comes to analyzing the data and the website.
Hey everyone, the #Higher Ed podcast is part of Connect EDU, a podcast network bringing together brilliant minds in the higher ed space and breaking down silos. You can check it out at connectedu.network, where you can find great shows no matter where you work on campus, as well as resources for first-time and long-time podcasters. You can also follow along on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod and #ConnectEDU. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the benefits and drawbacks to this iterative website design process that you're doing at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And I know, Jason, one of the major benefits that you've talked about is that you can do a lot of your work in-house. You're a lean organization. Why is that so important for Nebraska, Omaha?
Yeah, I mean, like you were kind of getting at, the simplest answer is we've been forced to. We don't have any permanent budget outside of our salaries. Again, great support from leadership. When we've done some user testing, some of our paid analytics like Crazy Egg, the odd survey. But we really here at Nebraska and the city of Omaha just pride ourselves on that hard work and get it done attitude. And again, third institution I've been at, and I've never seen anything quite like this. We're trying to build in budgets. We're trying to bring some permanency so that we can start to look outside and maybe analyze things a little better with a permanent budget. Things like customized search have been on our backlog roadmap for a while, doing some journey mapping, task research. But for now, in the budget environment we're in this state, our staffs have really stepped it up, both IT, my staff, and university communications outside of our teams. But obviously, that can't last forever. I have this idea, just like I feel like responsive design, and then that whole concept was kind of a big thing that led to a great change when it came to our websites in the last few years. And I keep kind of wondering to myself, like, what is going to be that next big thing that's going to force us to, change CMSs or do another big project. For now, we're doing it iteratively, and we're picking pieces that really are making good progress. But I do kind of wonder what is going to be that next big thing that really takes the whole team to come back together again and change the website.
With this iterative web design, when you're tackling sections of the site piece by piece, are you ever concerned about unintentionally creating a Frankenstein website where the site lacks consistent branding and just one section doesn't feel like it belongs with another? How do you try to avoid that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the downside of the iterative approach, like you mentioned. So, I mean, we are so lucky that we've had great partners in ITS. They have 2 front-end developers where that's their passion. They've been here all 5 years since we started this project. So really lucky that, we've had some consistency and stableness there, that they're able to compare and contrast the designs and the templates they're doing. I mean, I think this is happening in all higher ed websites. I mean, you give colleges their own templates, or they maybe have a dev and design team, and all of a sudden you kind of have this disjointed template environment where it looks like 20, 30, 40 different websites. With the governance we've set up and with our collaborations with ITS and kind of our structure, I feel good where we're at. But it definitely is something that keeps me, and I know others, up at night, that we want to make sure we maintain that consistency. I think you really need to focus on that when you find and hire new people, that they value that, because it's so easy in higher ed, no matter, even if you're not doing it iteratively, if you're doing big projects where you're doing, templates across the whole institution, it's really easy to let your guard down. So that's definitely something that we're thinking about. And eventually, maybe it'll be time. I kind of hinted earlier, like the next big thing. When is it going to be time for a new overhaul to just make sure that consistency is there across the board?
You mentioned a few minutes ago, you said, we have a lot of projects on our plate. It's not just the website. I'm wondering, has your team been able to kind of take this iterative design approach and then apply it to other areas, and other responsibilities? How are you becoming more agile in all of your other tasks that aren't maybe particularly website related? Yeah.
I think when we shifted out of that web conversion project, there was a lot of stuff that we still had to do that wasn't web related. So we weren't able to necessarily hire new staff, but we had staff that maybe were able to fill in. So, for example, our content manager, who also does social media, she stepped in and kind of re-engineered some of the functions around requesting stories for our internal newsletter. We had our CMS trainer, our content management system expert. She's been able to hop on and be kind of a product owner for our mobile app project. We even had a content strategist who's helping write some marketing materials for print or for emails for our CRM. So I think this agile, being nimble approach, iterative, it has been helpful with such a lean team, that we utilize their expertise, not for just stuff on the website, but for other things. And then it kind of helps with that consistency that we want on the website. It kind of spills over into some of our other channels. That's been a helpful part, that the team is flexible and is iterative, and that they can work with others on campus. But we're always open to having some more budget and more staff to help us with the never-ending backlog.
Well, maybe you've mentioned this next big thing. You've talked about it a couple times, and maybe that's the thing that gives you more budget and gives you a bigger team. But I'm curious to know, because you've mentioned this a couple times. I mean, is there anything specific in your mind when you talk about kind of what that next big thing is?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talk about it here at UNO, and I know across the Nebraska system as well. just about how content is attached to pages, or even, there's content out there in external systems that aren't even in the CMS. So my team kind of jokingly calls me the block guy. All blocks, no pages. They kind of joke someday we'll have no pages. It kind of takes some outside thinking, and it'll take, I think, a huge initiative. But we've kind of gone from a place where we had an entirely coded website where you had to log in, and do the code, to a CMS. And then we had a CMS, and maybe we changed CMSs, or we converted into a new CMS, into responsive design, for example. So I'm wondering if the next take, and I know this is a big talk in the website world, is going from responsive design to something that's more modular, pulling from authoritative content from a variety of systems. I wonder if that's kind of the next big thing that will really take us to rethink, maybe this iterative approach to another big project where we get a team together again and really start to hammer out a new way of doing things.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, definitely time saving if you could enter in your content into these modules and place it where it needs to go. I wonder about the search ramifications of something like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is why it would take a huge project to think through that and make sure that, how is it behaving in search? If people are using search, or if people are, not just the management of the content, but also people trying to consume the content or complete tasks, personalization. That's something that's going to take significant effort and some thinking around how the content's managed, versus right now, a lot of content is still on page and linked to a specific page. So I'm curious where this will go, and how soon will we be kind of forced to think through what that next big thing is. And when we did responsive design and the mobile phone was coming out, there was really no question, hey, we need a responsive design website. I wonder if this will be the next thing. Like, people will be silly if they don't, or maybe it'll be more under the hood, and it'll be a thing that a lot of people won't see. I don't know. I'm curious what will be the next thing that we're all really big working on across higher ed, across website management.
Hey everyone, a quick shout out to the agency that makes this show possible, eCity Interactive. I really do love coming to work every day at eCity, and that's not just because everyone shares my love of donuts, but that's really because I get to collaborate with a talented team working on everything from user experience to content and digital marketing to web design and development and a whole lot more. Our work has earned us an incredible roster of education clients, including the University of Pennsylvania, George Washington University, Petty School, Cornell, Drexel, Rutgers, and many others. So if you're looking to improve your web and digital presence and better communicate your school's story, visit us online at ecityinteractive.com and get in touch. Well, Jason Buzzell, thank you so much for joining the hashtag Higher Ed podcast. Before we go, make sure our listeners can find you, follow you, ask questions, disagree on the next big thing, whatever it may be. Where can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, I have kind of a funny app, Buzzlinear, Buzzilinear, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. There's a funny hockey story around how I got that nickname, and I gave away the ZZ on my Canadian background. But yep, find me there, tweet me, Facebook me, disagree with me. I'd love to hear from everyone, and the higher ed web world is a great place to be. And thank you for reaching out and talking to me today.
Yeah, the higher ed web community is incredible. Speaking of that, I guess that segues into this last part here. Which is, each episode, of course, we ask our guests to give a social shout out to a colleague or individual that deserves more recognition of their work. And Jason, I know that you came with someone in mind.
Yeah, I mentioned my Canadian connection, being a Canadian citizen as well, even though I'm down here in Nebraska. So I got to give a shout out to JP Rains. I saw his presentation at a conference on acquiring a bigger budget for web and digital. So fellow Canadian, good Sudbury guy, and I got to give a shout out to JP_Rains, RAINS, at at JP_Rains on Twitter. Good follow, good guy, and is really active in the community.
Yes, so excited to hear you say JP. JP, who was a guest on this podcast in season 1. So as soon as you're done listening to Jason, wax poetic on iterative web design, make sure you go listen to JP, who talks about user journey mapping back in season 1. Well, Jason, one more time, thank you so much for joining the #HireEd podcast. This was a great conversation. I really hope we can connect in the future, and I'm looking forward to seeing, what the next phases are for the University of Nebraska Omaha website.
Yeah, thanks, and I'll have to go check out that one with JP. I haven't heard it yet, so thanks again, Stephen, for having me, and I'll look forward to following you as well on the podcast.